Hello everybody, I'm Adrian Partington. I'm Director of Music at Gloucester Cathedral. But more importantly for this conversation, I am the Artistic Director of this year's Gloucester Three Choirs Festival. And I'm joined by Mr. Andrew Neill, who is of the Elgar Society. And he is with me because we're going to talk a little bit about the central figure of this year's Three Choirs Festival, who is Elgar. But before that, I just ought to tell you that we are opening the festival with Elgar's First Symphony. And we've got the Cocaine Overture, we have got Sea Pictures, we have got The Dream of Gerontius. But a little more about Elgar, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Andrew, to tell us a bit more about the Elgar Society.
Well, the Elgar Society is 75 years old this year, which is, alas, slightly younger than I am, but never mind. It was formed obviously in 1951, and at the suggestion of Sir Adrian Partington, great conductor, who was conducting an Elgar festival in Malvern at the time. At the end of January 1951, the Society was formed. From then on, it grew substantially, its membership peaking at about 16 to 1800. Nevertheless, over the years, we have been involved in either producing or sponsoring about 48 different recordings of Elgar's music, books, and obviously a number of very serious events. And perhaps the most important event we're supporting this year is this year's Three Choirs Festival, which, as you said, focuses a great deal on Elgar's music.
Thank you very much. Could I ask you a personal question?
Yes. Because this is important to me. When and how and why did you first become interested in the music of Elgar?
I was at school near Bristol, and I went to a concert primarily to hear the great Ita Handel play a Mendelssohn concerto at the BBC Symphony, conducted by Sir Malcolm Sargent. Right? And in the second half was a second symphony by a man who'd written Pomp and Circumstance, March No. 1. And that was a moment of, I'll never forget. I was completely blown away by this. And I wanted to get to know more of his music and know more about the man. Little did I know I'd be sitting here all these years later talking to you about it.
Oh, how wonderful. Yes. I had a similar experience. Mine was with The Dream of Gerontius. I'm sure I'm not alone. This was in the 1969 Three Choirs, and I was a Worcester chorister, as a matter of fact. And I wasn't performing in it. Choristers sang most of the week, but we were let off one evening. We didn't have to sing that evening, and I remember sitting with my parents and finding it astounding. And I was quite young, but I just thought this has got both a mystery and a majesty that I have not experienced before.
Yes.
And those sensations stay with you for your whole life, don't they?
They do. They do. And of course, I've had experience in hearing my first live Gerontius and First Symphony with variation, but there's still something about that first moment, isn't there? And some people would be surprised at the Second Symphony. Well, that's what he was. That was what I went to hear, almost by accident.
Yeah. Oh, what a fantastic work it is. Elgar and Gloucester, you were said in a conversation earlier that you thought that Elgar had an affection for Gloucester that he actually didn't have quite so much of for Hereford and Worcester, despite the fact that he was born in Worcester and owned for some years a house in Hereford.
Well, I'm only reading between the lines, and I think I've now lost a lot of friends. I have a bit further north. But I think he had a very close relationship, obviously, with Herbert Brewer, who was the director of music here for most of Elgar's important trilogies composers.
Yeah.
And I think I get the impression they got on very well. And I know people would immediately cite his relationship with Sir Ivor Atkins in Worcester. But I think Brewer, to me, comes over as a slightly more clubbable, friendlier person. And I think Elgar latched on to that. And of course, one of the things that Elgar did for Brewer was to orchestrate his choral piece, A Mess.
Yes.
In a very short space of time.
Yes.
Yeah, which Brewer was always very grateful. And it's quite clear that, to me, reading again between the lines, that Elgar was always very relaxed here. He could almost, of the three cities. He was born in Worcester, he lived in Hereford for a time, but this was a city he could come to and perhaps be slightly less obvious than in the other two.
I have read that too.
Yes.
I have read that he liked the people in Gloucester because he thought they were earth, and it's still the same now. Very friendly people in Gloucester. I have read too that, as you say, he wasn't quite so well known here, so he was able to meet discreetly his very good friend, a Lady Alice Stuart Wortley.
Yes.
At the Windflowers, from the inspiration for the violin concerto. He felt comfortable here. I even read, I didn't know this before, that since the Three Cross Festival in those days was in September, that coincided with the beginning of the rugby season, and he used to like to go to Kingsholm to watch the occasional match of rugby, because he was very interested in competitive sports, wasn't he?
He was. I mean, there are those who think he was a devotee of Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. Well, be that as it may, he certainly loved horse racing.
Yeah. Yes, he did, definitely. And he clearly enjoyed conducting in Gloucester Cathedral with its uniquely expansive acoustic.
Yes.
And there's lots of records of his work here. I have in my hand a couple of programs which I'm pleased to own. Here's the complete program of the 1928 festival, and I have one from the 1910 festival here as well. I think they're possibly quite rare now. But Elgar was conducting 3 or 4 things in the 28 festival, partly because earlier in that same year, poor old Brewer had died suddenly. So he felt jolly well at home. Another thing that you may know, and I didn't until recently, is in the early festivals, he used to like to listen sitting in the Triforium. We call it the Tribune Gallery now. So he liked to be high up, looking down on the action. No, I didn't know that until now. I think that's a lovely thing.
Well, it also stopped him being bothered by people. And
That's true.
oh, Sir Edward, tell me this. Would you mind? And
That was in Italy.
yes.
Although I think he quite liked that.
Oh yes. Up to a point.
Who wouldn't? And, that same year, 1928, he was made a freeman of the city of Gloucester. And so his affection for the city was definitely reciprocated. And, I don't believe that there were many first performances of his in Gloucester, but you know of at least one.
Well, there's 3, I think. I just remember the third, which I'll come to a second. One was his orchestration of the Bach Fantasy and Fugue in C minor. The other was the Empire March, which was composed in 1920 for the British Empire exhibition. And the unofficial first, you might say, A performance of the violin concerto.
Of course.
With Billy Reed.
And of course, because Elgar was so much in evidence at Gloucester Three Cross festivals and in Gloucester, he made friends with a young couple of composers, Ivor Gurney and Herbert Howells. Particularly Howells, of course, went on to have massive influence. And I myself, as a humble student of the Royal College of Music, studied with Herbert Howells, and so I'm able to view Elgar as my composition grandfather, which I'm very proud about. Howells, of course, studied with Stanford, and he's my other composition grandfather. I think that's stretching the point, but I think he did really try to help these young men. Coleridge Taylor as well. He was a benevolent and generous musician in his later years. But I hope you've all got the idea that Elgar loved Gloucester, loved to be here, and was in turn loved here. And I hope you all come and hear his work in Gloucester Cathedral, generously supported by Mr. Neill and the rest of the Elgar Society.